an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Season 3, Episode 8, Nathaniel Needs My Help. In this episode, swing and a miss for me here, kids. Maybe the first real swing and a miss of this entire show. So that is kind of an amazing record, and one that they should all be proud of. Nevertheless, didn't love this. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Tegan for commissioning this episode. What's up, Tegan? I want to let you all know that I am working on an update to the way that events are scheduled for Spoil Me's so that things will be a little bit more streamlined and correct on all platforms. I'll give you more details on that as we continue and get that all ironed out on my end. But for now, there's a button on the main unspoiledpodcast.com page where you can just click. It's on the left and it says click here for live events, and that will take you to the Crowdcast page that has all of the events that we have managed to enter so far, at least lined up in order from most close to furthest away. So if those of you who are interested in just looking at one title and seeing what's commissioned, eventually that all of that information will be there, as well as a spreadsheet, which it should be more concentrated and easier as well once we get the spreadsheet thing figured out. So just anyway, wanted to let you all know that because I know that that can be something confusing. And I have also, me and Candace are working on it and we've been frustrated a lot by it. So trust me when I say it's not just you. That said, let's get that out of the way and then talk about this mess of an episode. I don't want to say that like from beginning to end it's terrible, and it's not even that it's terrible. It's just, it's one, not fun. Two, I stand by my concerns about Nathaniel as a character. And three, it's frustrating and not in the way that I kind of expected a storyline like this to be. A major plot point this episode is Rebecca going back down the road of getting over-involved in somebody's life, borderline obsessive, and pushing other people to enable her on her bad behavior. And it's one of those, like, I'm not mad at the fact that she goes back and makes this kind of mistake again, because I've said before, that is just how it works. When you're trying to do better, a big part of doing better is fucking up, but then realizing that you fucked up. So in that respect, I really appreciated how the episode ends, because Rebecca realizes, oh my God, I can't believe I did that again. I can't believe and I like that somebody tries to confront her. Her therapist tries to confront her. I feel like one other person tries to say something to her too. And warns her, like, this sounds like some of the same shit you did before. And she argues with them. And that's how it is when you're in the midst of something that is a bad pattern for you. Oftentimes that bad pattern has a very innocent looking start, and it begins to get perverted as time goes on, and the innocence of it is quickly lost. So she argues against what everybody else can see very clearly is going on, but then eventually comes to the same conclusion everybody else did, which I appreciate. However, can I tell you guys how very much I do not care about these two as a couple? I am hopeful that the end of this episode is her actually dumping him, because it ends before she gets to say whatever she needs to say. It's just her saying, I have to do something I've never done before. And I'm going to guess it's dump someone because she hasn't really had to. But I'm not positive if that's like, because, you know, she's, the idea that she's never dumped anybody ever. I feel like we at least saw, what was her stalker's name? Oh man, I can't remember his name, guys. I keep wanting to say Grant, but it's that I don't know if that counts as dumping when you're not actually in a relationship, when you're just telling somebody. Trent, thank you, Lauren. So maybe it does. Maybe it is like the first time that she's dumping somebody. I am hoping, because what I enjoyed about Nathaniel was how ridiculously over the top his behavior has been at the beginning of his introduction to the show. He has been a bad man with fucked up priorities, a really messed up value system, and all of a sudden he's like a balanced person, because I guess the show didn't really know how to continue with him being as terrible as he was and have him also be a viable love interest for Rebecca. But I really need us all to look back at what he was like, and the way that he talked to people, and the kinds of like obsessions that he had, because that shit doesn't just go away. And we haven't had him actually coping with any of that sort of thing. Like, I mean, for me, the idea of her dating somebody like Nathaniel was like her dating someone like Valencia. He's extremely image obsessed, has a low-key eating disorder and like body dysmorphia thing going on, and is such an aggressive overachiever that he has this ruthless streak where he's willing to do kind of hateful things in order to get what he wants. And all of a sudden, we're just going to act like that never happened, and then that's not who he is. When she went to him to tell him that she wanted Josh destroyed, this man was willing to get Josh's uncle deported, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe Josh's dad deported. He was trying to get Josh's sister's scholarship taken away. Like, the things that he was prepared to do and fully believed she wanted from him are so beyond the pale as a person that I don't understand how that's not an issue for Rebecca. You know, I mean, it's one thing for a guy to have feelings for you and for you to be sort of dazzled by that, especially when one of your biggest issues is feeling like nobody really loves you or cares about you the way that you wish they did. However, there's a difference between being dazzled by that and pretending somebody is a different human being. And so the thrust of this episode is Rebecca wanting to get Nathaniel's father to see what a wonderful person his son is, when we know as an audience that is not the case. He is not a wonderful person. And I couldn't tell if the writers wanted me to agree with her, or if the point is that we know he's not a good person and she is so convinced he is, or if it's that they are like, maybe we're supposed to see that she's becoming obsessive and putting him up on a pedestal, but it doesn't feel like there has been a recent enough incident with Nathaniel being terrible for that, like, what's the word I want? When somebody like is delusion, I guess. I need there to be some real evidence that the way that she sees him is a delusion that is very definitive. And in order to feel like the show is aware that he's not a good person, I need that to be something that happened somewhat recently. Because we are basically ignoring a bunch of things completely. And this show doesn't usually do that. So what I'm in one of those places where I'm like, they may backtrack and address that stuff in a later episode. And I'm going to have spent half of this one very annoyed about that and focused on that. And it will turn out that it was kind of like a psych out, and they absolutely knew what they were doing. So with that in mind, I am trying to give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt that this is something that will be dealt with. But I keep waiting for that, and it hasn't happened. It's sort of like everything post him deciding that he has feelings for her and trying to come and sweep her off her feet and admitting to her how he feels. It's almost supposed to be like him deciding that he has feelings for her is what has suddenly made him a better person. And I'm going to need that to not be what it is, because that is boring and just, it's just unlike these writers, I feel, to make that sort of misstep. So I'm just really waiting for it, and it just keeps continuing. There's been several episodes in a row now of him being like a pretty decent boy, and he's just not Nathaniel. The reason that he's so boring now, as a character on a show like this where everybody has such distinct neuroses, he doesn't have any anymore, and that is not fun to watch. I need him to be somebody who has the self-awareness to realize the impression that he gave and to be trying to work on that. And I want that sort of, I want that to be an ongoing struggle for him. And I'm hoping that perhaps if she does dump him, that we'll get a resurgence of his shitty behavior and just as kind of confirmation that, but even if they do that, it's still going to feel like Rebecca was the linchpin for his good behavior. If it's, he turns into a good boy once he admits he has feelings for her, and turns back into a bad boy once she tells him that she doesn't want to have a relationship anymore, that is still making his morality sort of circle around a woman in his life. And maybe that's supposed to be the issue for him. Maybe we're going to see that is who he is, that he is only a decent human being when there is a woman motivating him to be decent. If that's the case, okay. I just don't really know what direction they're going to go. And as of right now, from where I stand, I'm really frustrated. So anyway, take that as you will. But because we start off this episode with 2 weeks from where the previous one ended. And him and Rebecca are in bed, and she is trying to get him to take a day off so that they can go to Raging Waters, which I love that is something that has recurred. And he tells her that he is going to take her to a fancy dinner in Beverly Hills. And when she expresses incredible surprise over this, he says it's kind of a schlep. I've been watching a lot of Seinfeld, and I have a Jewish girlfriend after all. And she says girlfriend in an extra surprised voice because he used the word voluntarily, and she's just extremely excited about this. I feel so bad at the fact that I am extremely uninterested in him now that Rebecca is getting some of what she's been looking for, because I want to just be happy for her, and I want her to just have a good time for once with a dude, but I just can't, So she goes to her therapist, and she starts to talk about how worried she is at the fact that she really likes this guy. The main factor for her that is causing her concern is that she buried her face in his shirt and took a deep whiff of him. and wound up taking the shirt with her, which I don't know about y'all, but I am super into the smell on guys' clothing. That was something for me with Owen that was like huge, as I would bury my face in his shirts, and the idea of like taking the shirt to wear, I totally get that. I don't think I've ever done it, mostly because I've always felt like if I wear it, then their smell will go away. So I need to keep it separate from me. But I really understand the impulse there. However, I also understand her concern about becoming as attached as she has to him as quickly as she has. And her therapist tells her, you know, you're working hard on addressing your issues. You just need to slow down and get to know him a little bit better. Be more mindful. And she says, okay, you know what? I can do that. And we see a little bit later her asking him about his life and growing up and what his childhood was like. And he tells her that he just really was not close to his dad, which we already knew. And he had one of those like weird sort of super privileged but also very lonely, isolated like childhoods that it's hard to completely feel like total sympathy for somebody who has so many resources and is just given a lot. But also he didn't even have siblings or anything. And he didn't. We think for a second that he does, but he doesn't. And she begins to realize that his father is like going to be her target for her obsessive, meddling behavior. So she decides to go and find out where his dad is going to be and track him down. She does this with the help of George, whom she drags into the bathroom. So I love this because I had expressed some questions and concerns about her continuing to work for the firm. And I wondered if we were going to get a real, like, you know, definitive yes or no on that. And what we get is a definitive no for now, that she isn't working there. As far as I know, she isn't working at all at the moment. And when she talks to George, she says, like, you know, I'm sneaking you in here because I just can't deal with people asking me, are you okay? How are you feeling? Asking me all these questions. Oh, good. I hope you're not dead. If you were so depressed, why didn't you lose weight? Guys, I don't think anybody would say that. I like your very normal body. It's brave. Oh my God. I loved her reaction to that, where she just goes, bleh. Correct. I love that that was included because I'm sure that has been a comment on every single episode by thousands of people throughout America. Being told that you're brave for living in the body you have is just one of those things that it's like, I know what you mean, but think about what you're saying. I get it that there's a standard out there that I don't fit, and that there are going to be people who don't even consider doing what I do if they don't fit that standard. But oh my God. You guys, can I just sideline for a second here talking about like people's comments on weight? I have realized recently that I'm very lucky in the bubble that I've created for myself of how like body positive my friends tend to be, and my family is really working on it. Most of the ones anyway. I don't talk to that many, but I am in a group about, that's about weightlifting for women, and I can't believe the shit that people still feel free to say. Like, these women share stories about comments family members made, that their own husbands make, their mothers still make. And I just can't believe that people still think this is okay. And it's just so pervasive and so gross. And this whole, like, you're so brave thing is just, on the one hand, it's so insulting and so condescending and so patronizing. On the other hand, it is brave because apparently you just have to deal with people just saying this kind of shit to you and continue on living your life as if that doesn't eat away at your soul slowly. So I guess there is an element of bravery to that, which is incredibly depressing. Ugh. Anyway, she says, the point is I can't deal with people right now, but I need you to do something for me. I don't have access to the company database anymore, and I need you to forward me Nathaniel Sr.'s calendar. I'm going to accidentally, on purpose, run into him so that I can repair his relationship with Nathaniel. And George tries to advise her not to do this. He tries to get, sort of extract himself from the situation after he has given her the information that he has. And instead, she basically blackmails him with suicide, telling him that if he doesn't help her, that she will try and kill herself again, and she will name him in the suicide note. This is one of those instances of humor that's very dark to the point that I'm not entirely sure this joke should even be made. This is one of those where I'm just and I want this to come up for Rebecca when she's thinking about the way that she acted, because mostly when she kind of comes to terms with what she's done, it's in the context of her going overboard with Nathaniel. And I'm yeah, you also threatened to blackmail somebody with your own suicide. So what about that, girl? I feel like that bears a mention also. So she shows up at this dude's country club and is following him, thinking that she can maybe sort of get on the course with him and pretend to bump into him there. She's wearing this amazing, by the way, pink golfing outfit that is 100%, if I were going golfing, something that I would buy as the costume. This is my golf costume. And it's a very sickly pink. It's not even a pink that I like, but it's the kind of pink that I would associate with golf if I were to associate any pink with golf. And I approved of it. And she sees him basically get out of the car, cross from that car to another waiting vehicle with a woman in it, and get in and drive off. And she automatically assumes that this whole deal is an elaborate cover, that the woman that he's going to see is someone he's having an affair with. And then when he gets out of the car, because she of course follows that car to its destination, he is greeted by a young woman who waves and says, hi there, old man. And Rebecca, for some reason, assumes that this guy is going to be his illegitimate daughter by his obviously mistress. Now look, I don't know. Maybe we'll find out that is indeed true. I don't remember if there's anything about this girl knowing who her dad actually is by the end of this episode. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure it's definitively that they are cousins, if I'm not mistaken. Something like that. But the assumption that she makes is so bonkers, guys. This is one of those things that, for me, this show is usually better than this. Rebecca does absurd stuff all the time. And her assuming this, personally, makes total sense, because that's how she is. But she is also, she's a lawyer. She's very thorough. And I just don't see her setting up this meeting between the two of them without double and triple checking all of her facts and absolutely making sure of whether or not this girl is related to him or not. I just don't see this whole thing happening. So when she makes this assumption, by no means did I think that she was actually going to see this through to introducing the girl to Nathaniel. I thought that there was going to be some that the rest of the episode was going to be dealing with her attempting to find out more information and getting close to setting the two of them up to run into each other, and then at the last second realizing that they weren't who she thought and pulling back. But part of what the episode did, and to a degree, I understand why they did it this way. It just, in terms of her as a character, it just didn't ring true, her actions. But I think what the show wanted was for Nathaniel to witness what she did. And therefore, we've got a moment of him choosing whether or not he can forgive her. And that being a major milestone for her is that she comes clean, or is caught really, doing something that is very obsessive and not okay. And then has to sort of wait to see about she has abandonment issues. And so she has to see whether or not they will indeed abandon her after finding out what she did. And he doesn't. So it feels like maybe because of the fact that he doesn't, and he sees past this to who she is as a person, it's supposed to be an indicator that he is patient enough with her that she can afford to be more honest with him about things than she's been in the past. It's just, I just don't know what to do with this version of Nathaniel. The Nathaniel that we knew at the beginning of this season is not somebody who would have been able to just sort of roll with this. And he tells her, you really can't do it again. And that is his ultimatum there. But nevertheless, this is really I didn't find it fun to watch. I found it really anxiety inducing and frustrating because it was a combination of the way that she was behaving as a character and the way that I felt the writers were doing her character a disservice. And it was also, it's such an invasive thing to have her do and have him sort of immediately be like, oh no, you can't do it again, but I definitely forgive you. And I don't feel like that's great either. There was just so much about how this whole thing went down that I didn't like. And I forgot to mention that we do see a group therapy session. And it's a sort of an interesting thing because they are talking about the phenomenon of personality disorder and being obsessive about stuff. And everybody in this room is using this this jargon, and I can't remember what they call it. I think somebody says to her, "That sounds pretty and that means obsessive." And this dude is saying, "I know how easy it is to get obsessed. I get very intense about stuff. I get very maniacally fixated on things," and that's why they thought that I was a paranoid schizophrenic, but they were obviously wrong. I am borderline. That's why I can't trust them or anyone else because they're all out to get me. And her therapist has to interrupt and be like, hey, can you take a breath? And this whole interaction with everybody in this circle is one of those examples when I was talking before about not thinking that group therapy session would be very helpful to me. This is a perfect opportunity. People are a perfect example. The way that anything gets immediately derailed because somebody else feels like they want to contribute. The way that he says something to Brent, but the woman sitting next to him is like, were you talking to me? Because you said such and such, but you were looking straight at me. He wants all of them to take a deep breath, and one of them doesn't. And Rebecca's like, Lana didn't breathe. The whole thing, I was just like, I just don't see a lot of benefit happening here. And that may be my own baggage, but just I don't know. maybe it's helpful, and I'm talking about not necessarily in this scene, but like in general with group therapy. Maybe the point is supposed to be that a group of other people who deal with the same issues you do, all saying that they see what you're doing as a symptom, instead of it just being your therapist who you think maybe is like looking for things to say are symptoms, that maybe that would make more of an impression on you and you would trust the group and their judgment more than you would just a therapist. I don't know. It's just tough for me to understand group therapy in terms of, I just don't know how anybody is ever fully vulnerable in a room of people that they don't know, which I feel like it has to be part of the therapy, you know? And that's my hang up. Like, I couldn't do it. And I just don't really understand how other people can either. This is when he says that she might be overextending herself because she is idealizing somebody. And the idealization is really the thing this episode. But we're seeing Nathaniel, we've seen him outside of the way she looks at him too. And the show seems to be idealizing him a little bit all of a sudden. And that's just... So, let's double back and let's talk about what's going on with Paula. Because Paula is similarly getting obsessive about things. And this is something that her husband talked about when he was saying, there's always something and it never seems to be us. This is a perfect example of that, where she is like understanding that she's been half present in her life because she's always thought about what could have been with her previous like first love, but realizing that and actually putting into practice being obsessed with your family instead of any other thing that comes up are two very different things. So what's going on is that Daryl has decided that he is going to find an egg donor, and Paula has decided that she has she's an excellent judge based on the information that is in these books, which he's basically given a catalog of women, a binder full of women to flip through and choose one of these women. And she narrows it down to one lady whom she believes is the only logical choice for this. To the point that when she calls up and tries to order the egg on his behalf, which right there, I feel like she should have realized what was happening. The fact that she is making this call for him is such a giant waving red flag, and is something that I'm pretty sure any receptionist on the other end of the line, hearing that she's ordering this on behalf of some dude, is not going to give her the information that she's looking for. Nevertheless, they tell her the particular woman she has her heart set on, they do have an egg, but this woman has asked them to put it on ice because she does not want somebody using it. Which, like, that's one of those things that I don't know the ins and outs of. I would assume it's kind of because you don't want somebody, like, who is potentially genetically related to you out in the world. Like, you said, okay, that's fine with me, but then for whatever reason changed your mind. I would be interested to know why. I think she mentions it, but it slipped my mind. But Paula decides to like break every rule and stalks this woman and finds her sitting in a park reading. This is one of those scenes where I'm just like, I just completely withdrew inside my body because of how cringy it is. So, Paula goes up to this woman and straight up tells her who she is, what it is that she's after, and tries to convince her to release her egg. You just have to sign a release form. Please let us have the last one. He needs it. And the scene ends with her not looking like she is going to agree to it. But later on, she tells Paula that she will, and tells Paula also, there is like a condition for this. And Paula immediately goes, oh, we'll work all of that out later. I just have to go and tell Daryl I'm so excited. So, talking about characters not really acting the way that they normally would, or in ways that I would think they would. Again, Paula is a thorough person. And somebody telling her, well, there's a condition for this, though. Am I alone here, guys? It feels like that is something she would immediately stop and go, condition? What is that? I do not see her telling them, we'll work all that out later. Like, just let me go and tell him first. I just that did not fit for me at all. And it's one of those, it's like in Goblet of Fire, when Hermione's pestering Harry about what the second clue is, the egg clue. And he finally is just like, oh, actually, I figured it out. And she just says, oh, you did? Good for you. And then moves on. Are you trying to tell me Hermione isn't going to ask you what the clue is then? And try and like help you? Like, it's just it's meant to move the plot in a certain direction, but it does not feel like the people that we have gotten to know. And it therefore feels very contrived what winds up happening, because it turns out that what she expects is to be paid like several, I think she wants like something like the equivalent of about $10,000 a year for the duration of the child's life in exchange for her egg. And when Paula goes to like confront her about it, she finds her smoking and realizes that she has lied all about like her whole profile on there was probably full of falsehoods. Let's see. You gave me my egg, but I gave you my egg, but I had terms. The way you approached me was a bit unorthodox, and I would hate for the police to find out that you violated my anonymity and stalked me. That'd be a bummer. So I'd like to be paid in monthly installments for the rest of the baby's life. Okay, so yeah, she doesn't actually like give her an amount here. But nevertheless, this is a massive amount that I would assume Paula would be the one paying, because she didn't tell Daryl the lengths that she went to find this person. And this is the moment where Paula realizes that she is essentially she's responsible for how this whole thing went down. She chose this woman, became so certain that she had picked well, that she then violated a bunch of, privacy laws and whatnot to track her down, which is very much in line with Paula being totally fine with like chipping people and putting trackers on their cars and everything. It's really very much in that same wheelhouse. So yeah, Paula comes to realize that she has to not interfere with people's lives once she goes and tries to tell Daryl. Well, she gets news that the egg did not actually implant the way that it was supposed to. And she's really pleased, because this means that this woman isn't going to be getting a payout. But Daryl is devastated, and she tries to immediately be like, well, we'll just try again. And he's like, nah, dude, that's not how this works. It's super expensive to do IVF, and I can't afford to do this more than maybe once a year. And because of how expensive and how big a deal this is for him, and she really didn't comprehend that, she realizes that she just needs to stay out of it. And she can be supportive and offer like help here and there, but she really threw herself in head first in a way that was questionable, to say the least. And the whole thing with Daryl and wanting to have a baby, I don't have a ton of interest in this storyline. I've got to be honest. Guys, if I'm being shitty, feel free to tell me so. but I just don't really care about baby plot lines. You guys know how I am. It's like involving a child in a storyline is already risky. And his daughter, like, they really hit it out of the park with her because she is a great little actress and very engaging. And so her being introduced to the story, I was a little bit like, and now I really like her. But a baby's a different thing. Babies don't have personality. You can make a plot line revolve around a baby, but that doesn't usually translate to being particularly entertaining for me to watch. I am much more interested in a plotline that revolves around a child who can speak and have reactions and be part of the story. And I think part of the disconnect as well is just not really caring about babies in general. And so his desire to have one, when he works full time and doesn't have help, I don't get it. It's just something I don't really understand the drive to do this in the first place and where it comes from, because he already has a daughter that he's like raising part-time. She's involved enough in his life that I am a little bewildered at his interest in having another child and doing this all over again when he's in the midst of parenting a kid that's about to get into a difficult period. I mean, I think she's like 9 or 10 right now. She's right on the edge of getting into like that tween puberty time, and he is really going to have his hands full. And the idea of doing that plus a baby, I don't really understand. Lauren says, I agree. It kind of came out of nowhere with Daryl. Like I can see it, but they didn't really seem to explain it to make it believable. Yeah, it just feels like in one sense, I understand how it's such a cliche that a woman wants to have a baby, that having a male character really want to have a baby is a nice, like, turning that on its head a little bit. And also he is such a maternal kind of person that it does fit in that regard with who he is. But it's just, we haven't really seen him address any of the part of the wanting a child that entails raising a kid and how full-time a job that is when they are a literal infant. And honestly, I want to just be like, Daryl, does it have to be your child? And does it have to be an infant? Because if you really want to help, there are a lot of kids out there who want homes and need homes. And maybe this is not going to be genetically related to you, but it's just, I would love to be able to skip an infant stage, you know, if I were going to have a kid. This is why I don't want one. So yeah, I don't know. This whole thing just doesn't really hold my interest very much. And because it took up such a portion of this episode, in combination with Rebecca trying to prove that Nathaniel's such a great guy, when I don't think any of us really think that, do we? Both of them combined really made for an episode full of things that I don't care about or actively am against, you know? And the one like highlight is him getting a song about how his sperm is healthy, because the way this works is that, you know, they use his sperm in combination with the egg that he chose. And he gets worried because Paula says something about like whether or not he is, you know, shooting blanks at this point, or maybe the sperm count is low and he should get checked. He gets very, very concerned about it. And then he gets his results back and everything is fine. And that song was fun, you know, it was fine. But really the main part of this episode that I liked was Josh's. So Josh is having to move out, And it turns out that his mother is planning on doing like a daycare thing from her home. And you get the sense right out of the gate that this daycare thing is really like just an excuse for her to find a reason to get him to leave. And as things progress, it becomes more and more clear that that is true. He is supposed to be packing, and he hasn't done any of the packing that he, you know, his room is still just like, so yeah. He says to her, "Why are you making me move? I don't want to move." She says, "I need this room. It'll be so fun living with Hector and his mother." She lives near Soup Plantation. You love Soup Plantation. I don't know what that is, but it sounds good. Sounds like a Panera or something, and I'm here for it. I love soup. And he says, "I'm just going through a tough time. Too much change. I'm still on probation with Aloha. I had to quit home base after my zit explosion. I went through this really intense thing with Rebecca, who, come to find out, never really cared about me. It's a lot of flux." And his mother just is like, "Dude, come on. Just pack up and let's go." And he obviously is there. Like, there's some truth to what he's saying. I'm not even trying to act like he's making excuses, but Josh is somebody who would never move forward if people didn't shove his ass. It really just, and there are people out there like that, you know, it's just, I've met them, and I am so not that way that I find it baffling. I really can't. Like, he says something later on about how he would have stayed living there and would have been fine with just like really following sort of a blueprint for a basic life. And I say basic in terms of just reaching like the bare minimum of what's expected to be an adult, and not really thinking beyond that with any sort of ambition that indicates he really understands what it would have taken to get those things. So he's like talking about like, well, you know, we'd buy a house and I'd marry Valencia and then we'd have kids and I'd see you guys every weekend. And I'm just like, yeah, but do you hear like do you really think about what it would have taken for you to get all of those things? You're acting like that's just something that comes. And I think that's what it is really, is that people are raised throughout elementary school and then high school and into college with these very fixed sort of goalposts that indicate you're progressing in your life. You leave elementary school and go on to middle school. You graduate middle and you go into high school, and that's really like the final chapter of that schooling. Then you go into college and you graduate with a bachelor's degree, or maybe even get a master's or a PhD. And those are all very firm, easy to point to accomplishments. And then after that, we have the vague sort of things that are technically optional, but most people don't really see them as optional. Buying a house, getting married, having children, retiring, grandchildren. That progression is very set. And I think people get so that they don't really see the potential of life in general as an open space that they can do whatever they want. They see a linear path that they are meant to take because that's what people do. And they don't really think outside of that. And Josh is definitely the kind of person, you give him a plan and he's a plan follower. You know, he is somebody who likes to just do the thing that's sort of just the next point on this track. And it's sort of because he doesn't have to think about it too hard, I think, that it appeals to him, you know? And that's not to say that just going and getting married and having kids and buying a house, that if you do that sort of thing, that you don't have any imagination. But I'm saying there are people who it never occurs to them at all that they could do something else. And just as somebody who is not planning on having children and who has been married twice and is doing something very unorthodox as their main income, the idea of simply doing things because that's what most people do is so not a thing that has ever really been a factor for me in how I choose to live my life. And that has been what appealed to me about life, is that you could do what you want and you can figure out what works for you and what doesn't. And it does take time, experimentation, failure, inevitably. But if you do find what you want to do eventually, that will have wound up being worth it, even though it was painful. And I sort of wonder if that isn't the thing with Josh, is that because the whole point of his storyline this episode is that being with Rebecca got him to realize that there was potential for more than what he had planned for himself. And I wonder if the thing that sort of appeals to some people about doing the very linear progression of life accomplishments is that other people are going to approve of it and understand it. You know, it's something that your parents will look on favorably. Getting married and having kids, a lot of parents seem to want grandchildren and would be happy to hear that you were about to have children. And the idea of like living close to home and seeing your parents on weekends and going to church every Sunday, these are all things that come with a high approval rating from the general public. And I think there's a combo there of like, if I do this, people will approve of me. And they come with such a high approval rating that there must be some inherent worth to them. So if I do this, I will feel satisfied with my life. And he's reaching a point where he isn't actually going to feel satisfied by that anymore. And he doesn't really know what to do if that isn't going to give him what he wants out of life. Like now he has to rethink everything. And I won't lie, as somebody who doesn't and never really did want to follow a traditional path for my life, it can be really scary, as much as it is fun and interesting to do all kinds of things that other people wouldn't want to risk doing. It is inherently a risk and it doesn't always work out. And that is part of doing something very different, is being prepared to admit, okay, nope, that's not it, and backing out of that. But the problem is it does take like a fair amount of time. So I tried all kinds of professions and went to school for multiple things. And ultimately, I think part of my breakup with my first husband was due to the fact that he felt like I didn't have a path. I didn't have a steady job that I was happy with. And he wasn't wrong. I didn't. But he also didn't seem to understand that I was looking for something. And now I've found it. But I've only just begun to make enough money to really live on, like in this past year. And I turned 36 in a week. So, you know, I'm edging up towards 40. And only now starting to feel like things are coming together. So that's one of the dangers. And I assume Josh has grown up with a very stable family, like structure. You know, he had siblings who are out getting school and doing all right. He's got two parents who are still together and are still living in the house that he grew up in. Probably that stability appeals to him deeply. And I never really had that kind of stability to feel like I needed to keep that in my life, and have tried to find it in other ways. So anyway, he just keeps on like putting off packing. He's supposed to be cleaning out his closet and getting all of his stuff out of there. And instead he keeps like coming across all of this stuff that is just making him really nostalgic. And he finds a karaoke player that is amazing. I just love this so much. He is so excited about it. And he keeps on, like, eventually he starts, like, playing video games and stuff. And his mother walks in hours later as I think he's back to singing at that point. And she is like, dude, seriously, what are you doing? And he says, the times in my life when I sang along to these songs, those moments are all gone. And his mom she's out of patience. She says, I understand what you're going through. Really, I do. But it's time to have a little conversation. Like, really, this dude is the idea that he's only just now realizing those moments are all gone. You should have, like, come to terms with this a little while ago here, sir. Like, you were engaged to Valencia. You were about to marry. I mean, there was a literal wedding with Rebecca. You were hitting some major milestones, and yet this sort of thing has just completely, like, not really registered for you. Man, you are not, like, with it, dude. You are not comprehending how long this has been true for you, and yet you've been ignoring it. He just hasn't wanted to look at how far back these moments that he idolizes a little bit, how long ago they happened. And look, a lot of people didn't have a great time in high school. So people who hold on to high school memories can seem a bit like an alien species. And as somebody who had a great time in high school, who was fairly popular and did a lot of, like, fun, interesting things and, like, won a lot of awards and whatnot, I understand really holding on to that sort of thing and being like, man, I miss the days where I could just, like, show up and put forth, like, a 60% effort and people thought I was a fucking genius. But Josh, honey, the fact that you haven't cleaned this closet out already, considering the steps you were about to take in your life, that is worrying, dude. What have you been doing? So she then puts on a song on the machine called You Need to Get Your Ass Out of My House. And it's honestly wonderful. I love it so much, guys. It's really what he needs to hear. And the whole way that this is done is just, why are you still here? I don't understand. And he sort of stops and is like, wait, what? It's time to get your ass out of my house. And I don't care where you go. I just want you to know you've got to get your ass out of my house. And then she just literally, like, drops the mic and walks out of the room. And it's wonderful. I love it. I love it. It's great. Somebody needed to say it, you know? So this leads to him coming to talk to Rebecca about it. He's got his closet cleaned out. He's talking to his mom about how the things he wanted, he doesn't want anymore. And he says, I'm trying to remember when it stopped making sense. And it was Rebecca. And his mother, she says, when you think about it, Rebecca's everywhere. And I kind of thought this was going to turn into a negative. Like, he was going to be like, fuck this bitch. She ruined everything for me. But instead he says, she changed me, and she made me think that my life could be different and that I could be special. And then says, oh my God, she ruined me. I spent my whole life in flip-flops and she made me want closed-toed shoes. I can't go back to my old life. I got to find a new life. And his mother is snoring. Oh my God, you guys. Can we just, I would so watch a sitcom that was just Josh's parents. I really want to so bad. Can they please get a spinoff? Yeah. So he goes and talks to Rebecca, and the reaction that she has when she opens the door and sees him standing there, it's very, very well done. I loved it. And he tells her, I set the bar so low for myself before I met you, and you freed me from that. So whatever my future holds, it's different from what I planned. And I just wanted to say thank you. That's because of you. And she is really startled by that. He says, I'm learning to break out of my patterns now. And I love that him saying this to her is kind of the thing that seems to shake her up and realize her patterns as well. It's like she has already started to figure this out by this point, like things have, but there's something about someone telling you that you taught them to do something better, that you are in the middle of fucking up yourself, that really makes you go, oh God, like I'm out here preaching a thing and I'm not practicing it at all. And I need to be better about that. So, she has already realized that she fucked up, but this seems to be the moment where she starts to think maybe she just needs to dump Nathaniel. I think is what she's thinking. We don't know by the end of the episode. And guys, this in particular, she says, thank you for coming here and saying all these things. That must have been hard. And he says, it was. And the truth is I'm a bit of a coward. I'm not great at doing the hard thing, even when I know it's right. Guys, can we just talk about what a difficult thing that is to admit about yourself, that you are a coward? And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say I'm not. I absolutely am. It all depends on the situation, of course. And I'm better than I was because I have started to realize that there are things that I will look back on and I won't be able to live with doing them any differently, because I've gotten old enough that I can look back on things that I have done that I am not happy about and the way that I handled those, and know it will only get worse if I don't start to be better. I don't like trying to fall asleep and the memory of me not standing up for somebody who deserved it comes up and makes my eyes snap open in the dead of night before I was about to fall asleep. I don't want to live with that kind of thing. And so in some ways one could say that not being a coward has become sort of a selfish act because I just want to be able to live. But, I appreciate so much that he just says that, because he really is a coward. It's crazy the lengths he was willing to go to avoid people and confrontations and stuff. It was just ridiculous. So yeah, she says, doing the right thing. Is there anything worse? Josh, not to be rude, but there's something I need to do. So can you get your ass out of my house? And I love the look that he gives her. 'Cause yeah, well, but yeah, she asks him to go, and it's a real sincere, there's no feeling anymore to Rebecca that she wants to keep Josh around or still has feelings for him or anything like that. I really appreciated how focused on herself she is throughout this conversation, which is very new, for her. So we have her going over to Nathaniel's house and him opening the door and inviting her in, and she doesn't come in. And he says, what's wrong? And she says, I have to do something I have never done before. And he says, what? And she clears her throat. And then the camera cuts away. And that is the end of the episode. So here's hoping that she dumps him. Fingers crossed. We'll see. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening. Sorry I didn't like this episode, but, it hasn't happened yet. So that's pretty good. And thank you, Tegan, for commissioning this. And I'll be seeing y'all soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.